We are about to do a new PvP tier list where we place in the newest characters for My Hero Ultra Impact since the last video that we did. This time around, we have to place the new Endeavor, the new Yaoyorozu, the new Bakugo, the new Toga, the new Aizawa, and the newest release, Tokoyami. So if you want to know how these characters stack up against all the other characters in this tier list, make sure you stick around for the rest of the video. But before we get into placing these particular characters, we do need to move around some of the older units. The very first unit we're going to move is actually in double S tier or meta. They used to be meta, I should say, but now I would argue they are no longer meta. And that character is the Ocean Sun Uraraka. The reason we're going to be moving her down is mainly because she does not have as good of cooldowns as other supports, but then also she doesn't bring as much to the table as other supports like the new Ocean Sun Nejire or like the new Yaoyorozu, who is just insanely good. So because she just doesn't bring as much to the table and she has bad cooldowns, we are going to move Ocean Sun Uraraka down to A tier. I do think she is still competent, but she's just not on the level of those other supports when it comes to being helpful in PvP. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. The next character we're going to be moving is also in double S meta right now. So a couple of characters are moving down, and it is another Uraraka. This one you might not have seen this one coming, but Fantasy Uraraka, while she was very good when she initially released, and I still think to this day she's actually fairly decent, she's mainly a crit support. Crit support doesn't have as good of a place in PvP when it comes to a speed AoE meta. And because Fantasy Uraraka lacks great speed and speed buffs for the team, and she lacks the AoE that, you know, like Nejire has, and she doesn't give last stands like the new Momo does, I feel like she just gets outshined a little bit by those two new supports. Honestly, Nejire and Momo are the best possible supports you can have. So we're going to move Fantasy Ochako down to A tier as well. And just keep in mind, as I move them down to A tier, even though they're down here towards the bottom, does not mean they're at the bottom of A tier. These tiers are not listed in order of best to worst, because let's just face it, that would take way too long. The next character we're going to be moving, and this one might make a few people sad, but I still think he's really good. I want to say that first off before I move him. But I'm going to be moving the green Mirio down to S tier. So he's just going down one tier. It's not that bad, okay? But the reason he's going down one tier is he's still okay in a sub slot, but he lacks great damage, right? He has that persistence, which can be really insane. And he has the ability to draw aggro. But I think when it comes to like a sub slot unit in terms of persistence, Red Deku does similar things to Green Mirio. But Red Deku can be one-shot, whereas Green Mirio can't. But Red Deku can do more damage than Green Mirio. So in that way, I would say Fantasy Deku, Red Deku, is almost better than Green Mirio. Mirio does have the ability to draw aggro, whereas Red Deku doesn't, or Fantasy Deku doesn't. But with the current AoE meta, it just really doesn't matter. So for that reason, we're moving Mirio down to S tier. The next character we're also going to be moving down to S tier is Redestro, and you might notice that tanks are getting moved down, and that is largely like massively because AoE is the thing right now. AoE is king, and tanks just can't do their jobs as well as they used to. Back like when Fantasy Kirishima came out, he was the reigning king and it was annoying to get past his defense, right? But almost immediately after, they introduced Pierce, and now we have Pierce, we have AoE, there's just so much going on. So characters like Redestro, characters like Mirio, they're going to struggle is what I meant. They're going to not struggle. They're going to struggle when it comes to doing well in PvP. Now in the lower ranks, I think these tanks can be really good. They could be really beneficial for your team. They're worth building up in lower ranks, but if you are actually trying to get to legend, these tanks are almost definitely not going to hold up. And so in that same line of thought, same thing, we're going to move Yellow Kirishima down as well to S tier, just because these three characters don't survive the AoE Pierce meta. They're still good options. They can be really insane. Redestro, I would argue, is the best tank out of them all, and he's free to play, so keep that in mind. but I feel like they just can't be in double S tier right now when the meta is AoE, speed, and status ailment nullification. Like it's a really annoying meta right now. Is any meta not annoying though? Let's face it. Now that we have moved all those double S characters down to S tier, that is it. We are not moving anything else. Everything else looks good. S tier looks good. A tier looks good. B tier, all of this looks fine to me. You know, if you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments. But now let's get into the real, meat of the video, and let's talk about these new characters. We're gonna go in order of how they released. So starting with Blue Endeavor. Oh my gosh, I wanted to fight to keep this character in double S tier. Like, I wanted him to be meta. I think he still is. Personally, in my personal opinion, I think Blue Endeavor is double S tier. I think he is definitely meta. But then I do, fact check myself. I see what some of the top players in Legend rank are thinking. I go into the Discord. I ask them their opinions on these tier lists, guys. So this is not just coming from me. This is coming from top ranked players thinking where these characters are, right? So I want a double S tier. But they pretty much came to the consensus that Blue Endeavor, while he does have insane AoE damage and he can increase your team's speed, he's kind of a glass cannon. And so if he loses a certain amount of health, he's no longer increasing your team's speed, and that can make him, kind of squishy and easy to kill. He's good in a sub slot, they seem to think. I think he's good in attack, like a main slot on attack, but to everybody their own. But for that reason, just to be fair to Endeavor, we have to put him up here in S tier. He's not quite double S tier meta, according to the top of the top Legends players, but in my personal opinion, I have had a lot of success with him, and he is what has let me climb to Legend for the past 1 or 2 seasons. So I think he's really good and still worth the investment even in S tier. The next character we're going to place is Momo Yayurozu, or Celebration Momo. She is an insanely good support. She gives last stands, she has healing, and she increases damage. Like, she is by far the best support in the game right now when it comes to PvP. And so for that reason, Yayurozu, you might have already seen this coming because of how I talked about the previous characters getting moved down, is going to be in double S tier. She is absolutely 100% meta, and if you ever get the chance to pull her, you should. The next character is the Red Bakugo. Red Bakugo, or Buff Block Bakugo, has insanely good damage, and he can be very good depending on the circumstances with his AoE that he has and the buff block that he has. And so for that reason, I think Red Bakugo, this one is kind of a debate between them. I don't think we really had a consensus on this one, but I'm gonna go with my gut, and I'm gonna put Red Bakugo up here in double S tier as well, just because buff block can be so insanely good given the right circumstances, and if you level up this character, he can actually do a really good amount of damage, and he has decent speed. Like, overall, Red Bakugo, I would say, is double S tier. But there is an argument for him to be down in S tier. We'll see kind of how it goes here in PvP in the following months. He might be moved down eventually. He will almost definitely be moved down eventually. But for right now, I do think this general pool, Red Bakugo, is double S tier. So if you have had the luck or the pleasure of pulling this general pool unit, that is a win, because not too many general pool units are in double S tier if you look up here. So that's a big win. The next character we're going to be placing for PvP is the new yellow Toga. Now, everybody, including myself, was hyped for a new Toga. They're like, yes, we're finally gonna get a Toga that is not complete crap. Well, yes and no. She's actually good in VE Tower, so there will be a VE Tower tier list coming out later, but when it comes to PvP, okay, her cooldowns are meh, her speed is meh, and in my opinion, recovery block isn't any better than block buff, which Bakugo has, which I would say is arguably better because you're blocking multiple things and not just healing, right? And then recovery block came after block buff, so I don't know what they were thinking, but yeah, for those reasons, because her cooldowns aren't great, her speed's not great, and recovery block isn't like as good as you thought it was going to be, even though she does have some AoE, the biggest hindrance is her action skill cooldown time, which you just can't overlook. I think it's 6 and 5 turns. We're gonna have to place Toga into A tier. So it's actually not a terrible placement. A tier, I think you can make use of her. She is, you know, relatively, I would say, better than her other Toga counterparts who are like down here in C tier. We have Blue Toga, so Yellow Toga is better. She is a step up, but not the crazy general pool Toga that I think we were all hoping for. Second to last, we have Red Aizawa. Red Aizawa, I would say, has really good utility and support, and this is a very unique character, being that he has a good mixture of damage and tanking. I feel like not a lot of characters bring to the table, no characters actually, bring to the table what Red Aizawa does, and I think he is just such a unique unit, and because of the things that he can do, I am actually going to place him into S tier as well. Even though he does not have AoE attacks, I feel like the things that he does bring to the table make him viable in the meta. The biggest thing keeping him in S tier right now actually is the fact that he doesn't have AoE attacks. If he did have AoE attacks that did damage, I would say Red Aizawa could potentially make it to double S tier. But for now, I feel comfortable putting him in S tier, and I think he could be one of those kind of sleeper units that could help you punch above the belt a little bit and take on teams that you might not normally be able to take on. And last but not least, we have the new Tokoyami, man. I cannot stress how excited and hyped I was to get this character. I was so happy. I'm still so happy I pulled him, and the showcase is on the way. I don't know if the showcase will go up before or after this video, but Tokoyami has really insane damage, like the hardest hitting normal attack you will ever see in the game. He has piercing shots and additional normal attacks, so you can hit, like with a level 130 Tokoyami, you can hit 70,000 damage per normal hit. That's like 140,000 damage just with your normals. Kind of insane. But his biggest problem is that he lacks speed early on. He does have scaling speed and damage, so as the battle goes on, if you make it far enough, then he will be the fastest character potentially in the game, but you need to make it far enough to get there, and a lot of times you don't because of the AoE Pierce meta that is going on right now. And at least Tokoyami does have one AoE move. I would have liked it better if he had two AoE moves, but I think he is still a very viable character. He's good. I think there are better options in terms of who you could use just because his speed is lacking, and so for that reason we are going to place Tokoyami into S tier. So we finally got to our second row of S tier characters. We just started it with Tokoyami, and I'm happy with placing him there. So overall, our double S tier shrank quite a bit, but our S tier grew quite a bit. And then anything below that, I would say you're typically not going to be using too often in Ultra Arena as long as you have some of these characters above. But then from there, if you are missing a majority of these characters, go through A tier, look at what characters you can use, so on and so forth. Hopefully this tier list helps you guys out a little bit, and if you guys enjoyed the video, please go down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.